6 o'clock. Welcome along to this evening's Rushcliffe Borough Council Planning Committee. I must apologise for my late arrival. The traffic's awful tonight. I've been sitting on the ring road for the last 10 or 15 minutes. And you know what it's like. Anyway, welcome to the meeting. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the Council's YouTube channel. A recording of the meeting will be available afterwards on the Council's YouTube channel. In addition, under the Local Authorities, Executive Arrangements, Meetings and Access to Information, England Regulations 2012, other people may film, record, tweet or blog from this meeting. The use of any such images or sound recordings is not under the Council's control. May I remind councillors to please switch your microphones off when you're not speaking. Thank you. So, Councillor Eddie.
Yes, I've just had a text from Councillor Georgie saying someone's bumped into her and she's on her way. She's going to be 10 minutes late.
Right, so I hope that's not the reason the traffic's bad. But,
I don't think so. Hopefully not.
Oh dear, Rob, that's understandable. Well, we'll welcome her when she arrives. So we'll go on to apologies in a few moments. So. I'm Councillor Richard Butler, the Chairman of the Committee, and Councillor Wells is Vice Chairman, and officers with us tonight is Mrs. Dodd, who is the Planning Manager for Development, Mr. Bate, Planning Team Manager, Monitoring and Implementation. That's a new title, isn't it? And Mr. Pettit, who's Senior Design and Landscape Officer, and Mrs. Walker, who is our Solicitor. So, we'll go now into the formal part of the agenda, and the first item is apologies for absence, please.
There are no apologies for absence.
No apologies, but we have Councillor Georgie's apologies for lateness. And do we have any declarations of interest, please? Anything tonight? Councillor Walker.
Councillor Preck's been trying to make contact with me by telephone, so I've just sent her a message. I assumed that she was having the similar difficulties to you. I'll update the meeting if and when I get more information.
Thank you. Yes, we'll keep an eye on that because Councillor Perek, I suspect, may be stuck as well. Yes, right. She could always leave a message on the voicemail, couldn't she? Instead of just ringing, just leave a message. Has she left one by chance?
She rang just as you were kicking into action, Chair. So I thought it'd be rude not to. But now I can now update you with news that there was a work emergency on way 10 minutes away, stuck in traffic, which won't be surprising news to anyone.
Indeed not. Well, again, we'll welcome Councillor Perek when she arrives. With the apologies and the notice for lateness we've noted. Item 2, does anyone have any declarations of interest? No. And so we go into the minutes of the previous meeting, which were held on the 9th of November. For those of us who are here, are we happy that they are correct? Yeah. Record, thank you. I'll just sign those. Right, so we go into the main reason we're here this evening, which is planning applications. It's slightly unusual tonight because all the applications are related to trees, so tree preservation orders. So that's makes a bit of a change. So the first item is the Yew Tree Close, Rushcliffe on Trent. This is the cedar tree, which is currently under a TPO, tree preservation order, and the application is to remove the tree. And Mr. Bates, you're talking us through this, I think, aren't you? Please, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, councillors. Just bear with me one moment while I begin the presentation. Okay, so, as Councillor Butler said, the first application is a TPO application. The proposal is to fell a single cedar tree. Cedar tree is located at Yew Tree Close in Rushcliffe on Trent. That is a site plan. Yew Tree Close is a dead-end cul-de-sac that curves around to the left-hand side. The tree in question is on the right-hand side, just on the entrance into the close. From those photographs there, the tree is the nearer of the two in the left-hand image, and in the right-hand image, it is the one that rises above the wing mirror of the Volvo. You'll see there that the tree is on a relatively narrow spit of land. It is owned by number 12 Yew Tree Close, which would be just off the image to the left in the left-hand image. There is a low brick wall that edges the pavement, and then there is this relatively narrow strip of land with rear boundary fences of properties on Lamcote Gardens behind. So the tree is in a relatively tight location. Limbs do overhang the highway, and they also overhang gardens on Lamcote Gardens. There is a little bit of history on this one. The tree is a cedar. Cedars do have a tendency to shed limbs. This one did drop a rather large limb several years ago, and at the time the advice given to the owner was that one dropped limb probably wasn't a major concern, might not happen again, no real justification to remove the tree. But earlier this year in the spring, another sizable limb was dropped from the tree, as you can see there, landing near the roadside. The application has attracted a number of comments. These images show what the tree looked like earlier in the year, in the spring. So you can see that at that time, the tree had lost a lot of its middle limbs. There was still some relatively low branches, and then a large gap where lots of limbs had been removed or shed in the past, and then a relatively small canopy right at high level. The tree is not considered to have a particularly natural appearance or high value, high amenity value appearance for its species. At the time, there was evidence of decay on the main trunk of the tree, and the majority of the remaining foliage was above that, presenting some risk of further failure. Works did commence to remove limbs under the dead or dangerous exemption, which has resulted in the appearance of the tree in these images. That's how the tree looks today. The tree surgeon who was undertaking that work stopped works as concerns were being raised by neighbours, and has submitted this application just for the avoidance of any doubt that he has approval to continue works to the tree. Cedars do have a reputation for dropping limbs as they age, and given its location immediately adjacent neighbouring properties and a road, it's probably not an ideal location for a tree of this species. We have had a number of neighbouring comments. The two neighbours whose gardens are overhung at 1 and 3 Lamcote Gardens support the application. There are objections from numbers 8, 3 and 9 Yew Tree Close. There is some dispute about whether the tree has dropped limbs in the past. Objectors claim that it hasn't. The two people whose gardens are overhung say that it has. And obviously, our tree officer has visited at least twice over the years to reports of fallen limbs. So I would pass that over to you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that. And now we do have a speaker on this item, and this is Councillor Upton, who is one of the ward members. So now's your moment to come to address the committee.
Thank you, Chairman.
Well, as you know, you have up to 5 minutes to talk to us, and the clock starts ticking as soon as
I think that'll be more than ample. Thank you. Good evening, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you about this application. Now, I've no expertise in the condition of safety of trees at all. I usually leave it to the council's specialist tree officer to make these decisions, and this is what I initially did regarding this application. You'll see that in the report. However, having become aware of some community concerns about the proposed felling of this tree, I subsequently objected to the application, quite frankly, so it be given a bigger and wider debate here by you and the decision made by yourselves. I've half a dozen points to make, and that's really it. The points I'd like to make is, well, this tree's been here a long time, probably over 100 years, and certainly before any houses were built on Yew Tree Close and Lamcote Gardens. It was given a tree preservation order back in 1980. I think it has an impact on the local landscape and can be seen from the public realm. It makes a contribution to nature conservation and ecology, and I suppose in some small way converts carbon dioxide into oxygen for me and you. It's lost some of its shape, I agree, by the removal of some of its lower limbs. But visually, as you see, it doesn't stand alone and forms part of a group. And I've always felt the felling of mature trees should be an action of last resort. So I leave it to your good auspices to decide on that one. And really, could any limbs that present an unacceptable safety risk be removed and the tree remain? In conclusion, I hope you'll have a good debate about this, future of the tree. And if you agree with the recommendation to execute it, then could it be swift and painless, I suppose? And urge you to put a condition on that a suitable replacement tree, maybe a yew tree, is provided would mirror yew tree close. So that's it, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. I'm sure that your choice of language was quite accidental. Right, okay, so no other speakers on this item. Do you want to pick up on any of those points, Mr. Baker? The age and the can single limbs be removed, for example?
Thank you, Chair. From the images that you'd seen previously, I am just going to try and get some of those back up on the screen just for a moment while I talk. The tree has relatively few limbs remaining on it. Those that are left are at high level. And the concern would be that because of its position, there are no limbs that wouldn't have a potential to land either in neighbouring gardens or into the highway. So I
haven't got that on the screen.
That is interesting.
Yes.
Bear with me one moment. I will continue to try to share the screen. But from the images that had been shared previously, there effectively aren't any limbs that, if I share screen instead of sharing a window, there aren't any limbs that wouldn't have the potential to land. It doesn't like that. No, now it's there.
Yeah.
There aren't any limbs that wouldn't have the potential to land either in neighbouring gardens or in the road or on footpath. So in terms of removing only the limbs with the potential to pose a hazard, arguably that would still be all of the remaining limbs, which would just leave sort of a bare pole. The recommendation that's presented to the committee does include replacement tree planting. For reasons explained earlier, cedars do have a reputation for shedding limbs anyway. So in terms of replacement planting, it wouldn't be particularly appropriate to plant a young cedar in this location. Ultimately, it would pose the same risk in future. There is a suggestion in the comments provided by the landscape officer that a yew tree would be a reasonable replacement in that location.
Okay, right. Thank you. So, colleagues, any comments, questions? Councillor Chaplin? Oh, actually, before we continue, sorry, just welcome Councillor Georgia. Do not worry, there's been awful traffic tonight. I got here literally on the dot of 6 o'clock. So, yeah, as we've heard, so I'm very sorry to hear that. And also Councillor Parrick's also having similar traffic delay problems as well. So don't worry yourself too much. But I just wanted to make sure that before we go into this actual item, just to confirm we've all received the late representations, both on email and hard copies as well. So sorry about that. Councillor Chaplin, please.
I was just going to ask, what's the condition of the tree that's close to it? Is that healthy?
And so the other tree that in the images was normally shown just to the left, that is a Wellingtonia. That has a slight lean on it, but no immediate concerns about its longevity. It may be revealed more with the removal of the cedar. There's no suggestion that there would be any harmful impacts upon that neighbouring Wellingtonia.
And Councillor Calvert. I think my question has been answered, but it was to do with that, the Wellingtonia. I must say, when I did the site visit, it was a striking tree. And I was just wondering if the removal of the cedar tree, would that have any impact, either positive or negative, by removing it on the Wellingtonia itself?
So there's no suggestion there would be any negative impacts. It might open up views and better reveal that tree. There might be some sort of minor positive benefit of reduced competition and daylight to that tree, but it's already relatively mature, that one. So no great benefit, but no harm either.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson and Councillor Edivine. So Councillor Thomas, please.
Yeah, I was just wanting to understand a bit more about the tree as it is now. I couldn't quite work out which bits of foliage belong to it, as it were. So if you could go back to the picture and explain which, if any, of the bits of green belong to it, but also what would happen to it if it was not felled at this stage? What are the options for preserving it in some way?
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. So the image on the right shows a fairly stark, tall main stem with a relatively small crown of limbs right at the very top. So there is very little canopy and certainly no natural appearance remaining to the tree. As has been explained previously, the tree has shed large limbs in the past. Cedars have a tendency to shed limbs as they age in any case. There is some decay present that potentially poses a risk, particularly to any higher foliage that remains. There would be relatively little that could be done to allow the tree to be retained that would be risk-free. I believe earlier, Councillor Clark, who's one of the ward councillors for the area, had asked whether if all of the foliage was removed, would there be any potential for regeneration if the tree was left as a standing pole. The advice there is that it would be highly unlikely. If there was any regeneration, it would probably be at the very upper parts of the tree, so that it would still be that unnatural shape. And sort of regrowth is always on any tree species more poorly attached than natural growth. Given that cedars have that tendency to shed limbs anyway, any regrowth would only be an even greater risk, particularly at a height where it would gain some speed on the way down. So there is little that can be done to retain the tree.
Is that helpful?
Yes, it does. I do have a supplementary, if I may.
Yes, yeah.
In terms of replacement, are you talking about one tree or multiple trees, and what sort of maturity? Thank you.
So in terms of the numbers, the position of the tree doesn't make it easy to plant multiple replacements. So as explained, it is in a narrow spit of land between a wall and a fence. The remainder of number 12, so the garden area within the tree owner's control, has a number of trees in it. It's quite well landscaped. The rear garden, any planting there wouldn't have any great public amenity value. So the proposal is just to require one replacement tree. In terms of the maturity of that tree, I mean the condition as drafted doesn't specify any particular age. I don't know if Tom would comment on whether.
We don't tend to. We normally do it by agreement, and obviously, if it's a housing developer, we're sometimes inclined to ask for a larger tree. If it's a homeowner, but we just want something with some initial impact. So I imagine it would be, at least 2.5–3 meters tall. I think that would be a reasonable compromise.
Thank you. And of course, as you say, the condition makes it clear that whatever tree is proposed has to be approved by the council before it appears anyway. And Councillor Reddyveen, please.
To be honest, Mr. Bates actually answered my question or my observation, and that was that whilst cedars can be magnificent trees, they're not renowned for regenerating themselves when they're in such poor condition. And I think that's already been answered.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Malander.
Thank you, Chair. Well, actually, I've just been reading that apparently you can cut them down. Did Councillor Clark, I presume, meant cut the top down so that it's shorter, which apparently you can do. You can cut about a quarter off from the top, and it will regenerate. Most trees do, actually. I'm also concerned about the point that there's no competition for the Wellingtonia if the cedar tree was removed, because actually trees rely on each other. You might have heard of the wood wide web. So actually trees communicate with each other through fungal hyphae, fungal mycelium under the ground. So if you killed this tree by felling it and then the roots rotted, you'd have a big space for a start, which might undermine the roots of the Wellingtonia. And also you could be damaging the fungal mycelium on which it depends. So you do have to be very careful with this sort of thing. And I was wondering whether it could be tried to reduce the height of it, because admittedly that is the problem with it, because if those branches do fall, that's a hell of a height for a heavy branch to fall from. So I think I was wondering whether that might be a possible solution. We have some sort of expert in cedar trees, perhaps. I might know one because we have a lot of cedar trees at Woollerton Hall.
Yes, do you want to pick up on that, please? Bearing in mind that the application we have in front of us at the moment. But
yeah, some trees respond to sort of large scale pruning quite well because they've got a lot of dormant buds that react to light and regenerate. If you look at pines and cedars, they don't tend to do that. And I really think if we were to take off the top of the tree, there'd be no foliage left and you wouldn't get any quick regrowth. And I'm almost certain that the tree would die. Yes, I take your point about the roots. You know, the worst thing you could do is sometimes pull up a tree because you're ripping out the roots and that's damaging the adjacent tree roots. But I think if it was felled and allowed to, well, you could stump grind the base of the tree, but I think the roots would decay over a long period of time and it shouldn't harm the Wellingtonia. And they're quite a robust tree. Wellingtonias, you know, they've got good wind resistance.
Could I ask a supplementary then in that case? If it is decided to fell it, then can I ask that you don't grind out the roots? Because another really marvellous thing for wildlife is standing deadwood. So if you leave it, say, a stump, you could perhaps, you know, some ivy might grow up or something to produce really excellent wildlife habitat, because so many creatures depend upon holes in trees. And standing deadwood is very, very important. So perhaps that could be another tree. I fully agree with the idea of having a yew tree anyway in a place that's called Yew Tree Close. I really detest the fact that, you know, houses are built on places and call things like Elm Avenue or Oakwood Close, and there aren't any trees there because they've all been chopped down to make way for the houses. So it would be nice if there was actually a yew tree on Yew Tree Close. I don't know whether there is. I've tried to look on Google Maps, but I can't really tell from that magnification. So I would ask that we leave some standing deadwood as well as planting another tree, preferably a yew tree, which is a native species, as well, please.
Yeah, yes. What can we do about that? Is that realistic?
I'm not sure we can make them, but we could do it as an advice note. I think that would be that would be my suggestion.
Okay, I was wondering who would be the first to pick up on the fact it's a cedar tree on Yew Tree Close, but so well done. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I suspect none of us here, when we initially signed up to be councillor did so on the basis that we'd be facing killing trees, making a decision about whether to kill a tree or not. It's the first thing that comes to mind. The second thing is, I think paragraph 36 of the report is fairly sort of conclusive in terms of the expert advice that we're being provided with here in front of the committee. But I want to make sure I understand the drafting of condition number 2 in terms of if this is the decision, what this actually means. So tree A is planted, which is the replacement tree. I think I understand that if within 5 years of that date, tree A dies, it has to be replaced with tree B. What happens after 3 years if tree B dies? So is there sort of a rolling, is it drafted? It's not immediately clear to me from the drafting whether that's a rolling requirement or not. And I suppose linked to that is, from where do we get 5 years and how do we know that that's sort of the right number?
Rolling 5 year, then
One option is to make a tree preservation order to protect the replacement tree. Hopefully we wouldn't get an objection about that. You know, I think that would be the best way to secure its long term. And we can do it, you can actually do it as a condition. So you can protect a tree that's going to be planted under condition ahead of it taking place. So maybe that would give you some reassurance.
Yeah, yes, because as we were saying, when the time comes to plant the replacement tree, it's still got to come to us in the first place. So at that point, we could put conditions on then. So does that help? Yep. Okay. Oh my goodness, Councillor Calvert and Councillor Thomas again.
Just want to know that if we kept the stump in place, can we also have a replacement tree in another part of that? A little bit of land.
I think we could grant permission to remove it, condition a replacement, advise that they keep the stump. But I don't know if we can make them keep the stump.
It's advisory, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. It would appear as, well, literally as an advisory note. Yeah. Permissions.
Yeah, two questions really. Was the tree officer consulted when the decision was taken to fell the tree in the first place because it was dangerous and dying? And the second question is, will other trees be made visible in the public realm from the felling of this tree, and have they got TPOs? Thank you.
Come, Mr. Beck, yeah, straight to you.
So yes, the council's tree officer, like I say, visited site several years ago when a limb fell from the tree, and visited again in spring of this year when the most recent limb fell. And yes, advised at that time that given the tree was continuing to drop sizable limbs, given the proximity of the road and neighbouring property, that it did pose a risk, it was dangerous, and that work could take place under the dead or dangerous exemption. So yeah, that was done with the knowledge and advice of the council's tree officer. In terms of whether any neighbouring trees would be better revealed, the Wellingtonia behind would be marginally better revealed, but the tree in its current form has so little foliage that it doesn't currently really obscure anything. So there would be a very limited sort of revealing of trees nearby.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've had a pretty good discussion on this. Does anyone want to move things forward, perhaps with Councillor Mallender?
Moving anything forward. I still think we could chop the top quarter off. But anyway, so I'm not voting for it anyway. But but I am. Yes, we do want the stump left as an advisory, but also I didn't mean not plant another tree as well. I mean, in addition, that it should be definitely a condition that you plant another tree, preferably a yew. It would have to be in a slightly different position. It's not in a great position anyway, is it really, right by the road? And a yew tree will spread wide. They live for thousands of years, so and probably longer than the houses will be there, and they spread outwards. So I think you'd have to have a good think about where you would put it as a replacement anyway. But yeah, replacement tree and standing deadwood.
I think that's it's pretty much there anyway. Replacement tree plus the advisory of the base. Councillor Walker.
So I think I understood from the response before that there's an option here that the replacement tree gets the benefit of TPO from birth. Is that right? Is that my understanding correct? So that's a possibility.
That's a possibility. We can make a tree preservation order.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if it is, I'm happy to propose the recommendation in the report with that as an addition.
Thank you very much, and also the advisory that we've been discussing as well. So you've proposed it, and Councillor Wells, you're happy to second that?
Yes.
Righty ho. So I don't think there's any other speakers on this one. So we've had quite a good debate and discussion. We know what we're doing. We have the recommendation in front of us with the additional advisory and also the reference to the TPO as well. So those of us in favour of that, please show. Oh, actually, Councillors Georgia and Perrick, because you weren't here at the start of this item, you can't vote on this one. So members who are here, please show. And I think that's unanimous. Oh no, it's not, isn't it? So those against, one. So it's Councillor Vanity, your vote is noted. So the permission to remove and replace is granted, along with the advisory, and also that any new tree will have a TPO on it. Right. Welcome, Councillor Parrick. Don't worry that you were late. It's been an awful night on the roads this evening. I only got here bang on 6 o'clock. Councillor Georgiou's had an incident on the road, so she was a bit late as well. So don't worry, it's okay. So we'll go on to our next application, which is Radcliffe on Trent again. This is 2 School Bungalow, and this is to introduce a tree preservation order. So over to Mr. Pettit, please.
Good evening, everyone. So this is slightly different. This is where the next 3 items are where we've made a tree preservation order, but the owners of the trees, or maybe neighbours, have objected to that order, and we are obliged to consider that objection before deciding if it should be confirmed or not. So this one relates to 2 oaks and 2 horse chestnut trees in the grounds of 2 School Bungalow, which is associated with South Nottinghamshire Academy in Radcliffe on Trent. The interesting thing about this site, it was recently auctioned with no access, so the school didn't want people to gain access to the bungalow once it was purchased. We obviously became aware of that when we received pre-application inquiries about whether access could be gained from the road to the north. Which is, if you move on to the next slide, some attractive sort of Edwardian, Georgian sort of terraces and semi-detached properties. And if we go to the next slide, you can see that the trees are quite a prominent feature at the end of that road. I'm not saying an access from the road is impossible, but it's a challenge. There's a change in level. So what we want to do is try and protect these trees. We believe an access to the bungalow will require a planning application. One of the neighbouring properties, and if you look at the image, it's the owners of the property on the right in the slightly pale blue, grey coloured house, objected for a number of reasons. They've lived there for 12 years, and during that time, the school has never pruned the trees, despite being asked to. They feel that particularly the horse chestnut, shed leaves and conkers over the garden, which are a nuisance and danger to them and their pet dog. The overhanging branches, again, a nuisance, and they're concerned about health and safety risks. They're concerned the branches could fail in high winds. They've invested in the property, but they feel that they can't enjoy the garden in the summer months due to the lack of sunlight, and there's issues regarding bird waste, and the general fear that the trees might fail. The property owners who have rejected have engaged with the school in the past, but they feel they've been, in their words, fobbed off in the past. The school has advised them that they've got a common law right to prune back overhanging branches, but they feel that's a little bit unfair to them because they feel the school should be maintaining them. They suggest elderly neighbours to either side worry about sort of slippy leaves in the autumn when it's wet, and they believe the TPO will make it harder to coordinate work. The objection relates to a general lack of maintenance, and unless a tree is likely to cause damage and there's an obvious risk of failure, the council can't enforce work. And this tree preservation order isn't going to allow us to make the school prune the trees. And at the moment, we're interested in protecting them. But that's not to say that it prevents applications being made. So the owner of the bungalow or the neighbour could apply. If the neighbour applies, they first need to seek the council's permission, and then depending on the scale of the work, they can cut back overhanging branches to the boundary line without the tree owner's permission. But if they want to do more work and gain access or go beyond their boundary line, they not only need the council's permission, but also the tree owners. Neighbours have a common law right to prune back overhanging branches and can do so without the tree owner's permission. But unfortunately, that does mean they need to cover the cost. But that's common law and beyond our control. Concerns over leaf litter, loss of light, bird droppings are quite commonplace. We need to be mindful of these concerns, but on their own, they're not a nuisance. They're more of an inconvenience and one that's sort of to be expected living alongside large trees. And we believe that some of them, could be controlled or limited through pruning. We can't say what we'd allow, but the greater the extent of the work, the more justification that's required. And I'm sure some pruning, if it maintained the character and the appearance of the trees, particularly from a public vantage point, would be acceptable. As you can see, they're located at the end of Lincoln Grove. They're a prominent feature that enhances the setting of the properties, which are quite characterful. We are slightly concerned about what the future is for the bungalow. We know probably going to at least get an application to create an access, but beyond that, the future of the site is somewhat uncertain. So the recommendation is that the Rushcliffe-on-Trent tree preservation order be confirmed without modification.
Thank you very much. We don't have any speakers on this item, so we can go straight into a discussion and decisions. So does anyone have any questions or comments to make on this? I suppose the thought going through my mind is, and as ever, we can never predict or wonder what potential future planning applications might be. I know that's only too well, but if there was a planning application coming in at some stage and the access is basically where the trees are, how would it be handled if a tree preservation is in place there? There would be discussion and or how would it work in effect? So assuming that someone comes along and says, I want to create an access, but there's a TPO, how would we deal with that?
So there is a gap between the trees. So I think you have got space to get a vehicle in. The challenge is the change in level. And there are ways and means of mitigating damage to roots. Ideally, you want to build up the levels rather than excavate into the ground. With the bungalow being higher than the road, that is going to be a challenge. I think really it's for the applicant to come forward with a tree survey that, perhaps suggests how close work can be. They need to come forward with good arboricultural advice and perhaps engineering advice. There is a chance that the trees could be retained and a construction and a new access be created. I can't say, but there is a chance that an application may require some tree removal.
But the point being is that if that moment came, there are ways to manage it as depending on what the circumstances are at the time.
Yeah, a tree preservation order gives us more enforcement powers. It would sharpen the minds of anyone doing the work to be more careful, and it allows us to condition replacements. So I think a tree preservation order is useful in this circumstance.
Okay, thank you. It's Councillor Thomas and then Councillor Walker.
I'd like to move the recommendation, please. I think the existence of the tree preservation order isn't going to prevent anything being done to those trees. It's just going to control it. And so I move the recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And just before I ask if you have a seconder, Councillor Walker, did you want to come in?
I just wanted to ask if you could remind me what the test is that the council applies when making the order in the first place, please.
Yes, it's all about the public amenity value of the trees. So it's their appearance, particularly from public vantage points. With the trees being the backdrop to the end of the road, that's why we protected them. They do enhance the public setting.
Okay, Councillor Mallender.
I was just going to offer to second the recommendation, yeah, I mean, bird waste. I think, well, that's wonderful that you've got an oak tree which supports more wildlife than any other tree in this country, and it might even have bats in it. So because of all the insect life that oak supports, so absolutely marvellous. Yeah, so it must be lovely to see all those birds, I would have thought. Yeah, so I'd like to second the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have the recommendation moved and seconded. Does anyone else wish to make any points, or shall we go to a decision? So, right, let's have a show of hands. Those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous, isn't it? So that TPO is granted as per the report. So we come on to our next application. This is another tree preservation order. This is St Mary's Church, Barnston. And again, Mr. Pettit, you're leading us through this, aren't you? Yes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we've protected 9 new trees, 4 sycamores and 2 lime trees within the grounds of St Mary's Church, Barnston. It's a formal chapel that's no longer a place of worship that has planning permission to be converted into a dwelling. As you can see from the photos, it's on the edge of the village. There's fields beyond this. There's one property to the south, and it's quite a prominent location as the road sort of just bends around the trees. I would suggest it's quite a selective tree preservation order. We're focused on trying to protect the trees on the frontage of the site where, as we just discussed, we're trying to protect trees that enhance the public realm. And what you've got is a sort of a line of yew trees alongside the road with some larger sycamores above them, but the rest of the site is covered by trees. So there's more yews between the roadside ones and the church. There's also some trees at the back of the site. But obviously, when we granted permission for it to be developed, we felt that it's only going to be natural that the owners of the property will want some natural light to the south-facing aspects of the building and the garden. So we've not protected all of the trees. It was made on the 21st of September. We've got 6 months to confirm it. An objection has been received from the owner of the property for the following reasons. They wish to rescue the church from vacancy and make it into a family home for their children and dogs. The objection relates to 8 of the 9 protected yew trees. Yews are common in churchyards, but it's now redundant as a place of worship, and it will be converted into a family home. The trees are not of ancient significance, and the site's not covered by a conservation area. Yews are known, well, they are, as one of the most poisonous plants in the world, with the Woodland Trust noting that eating just a few leaves can make a small child severely ill, and there have been some deaths linked to yew poisoning. The Human Rights Act 1998 states, everyone's right to life shall be protected by law. No one shall be deprived of his life intentionally, save in the execution of a sentence of a court following his conviction for a crime for which this penalty is provided in law. I think they feel that, the youth will deprive them of their peaceful enjoyment. They won't be able to relax and let their children and dogs run free without constant monitoring. They sort of argue that the only property to the south and the majority of the protected trees are not between the church and the neighbouring property. They believe the local community would prefer to see the church rather than it being screened behind the trees. As part of the planning process, they had a tree survey commissioned, and some of the trees are category C, which are trees of low quality. And the tree survey notes that the woodland setting is attractive. There's been minimal management of the trees, and the old church is largely obscured from view. Between the church and the road, a double row of yew trees lean over the roof, leaving the area dark and oppressive, with little natural light reaching the windows. There is scope to remove a proportion of the trees and open up the site without spoiling its setting. They believe that some of the trees are causing movement to the churchyard, and they would like to prevent that in the future. They're also concerned that we've protected the roadside trees, and obviously, trees will grow. They could overhang the road, and they might need, pruning to keep the highway clear. They're also worried about failure and what would happen if the trees were to fail. The objection does not cover yew tree T4. They believe that's quite close to the proposed driveway, and they feel that could be secured and retained without any harm to their children or dogs. In response to that, yews are a common churchyard tree. Some predate churches. I'm not suggesting these do, but they were commonly planted in Norman times because the poisonous leaves deterred grazing. Whilst the church is no longer a place of worship, the conversion will still keep the character and appearance of the church. So we feel the yews contribute to its general character. Yew trees are well known for being poisonous. The Horticultural Trade Association places sort of poisonous trees that are commonly sold in 3 categories: A for the most severe, down to C, which are relatively minor. Using category B, and there's some quite other common garden plants within that category. I think the key issue is, is it reasonable for the owners to wish to remove 8 of the 9 protected trees when they're a common churchyard tree? And I would probably argue we've only protected 9 out of 21 trees on the site. So, I think we have tried to be selective. Whilst the Human Rights Act protects the right to life, there will inevitably be a degree of risk in most common day-to-day activities. And I think teaching children managing risks is part of life. We've protected the most prominent trees, the roadside ones. We don't give much weight to views from private property, so we haven't protected the trees at the back of site, which will be visible from the neighbouring property. We recognise that removal of some trees will open up views of the church, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think people do want to see the church, and it's got historical and visual interest. But I hoped that the tree preservation order was sufficiently selective to allow that to take place. Of the 15 trees protected, 2 are category A, which is trees of high quality. 11 are category B, trees of moderate quality. And there's only 2 category C trees. We do try and protect the best quality trees, but particularly when we look at public amenity in which trees are visible to the public, sometimes we can protect the lower quality trees. There's a suggestion that the trees contributing to movement in the building. Again, we've not protected the trees closest to the church, and so that there is some option to carry out work. And I think maybe allowing those trees to be removed, and then maybe the building work to commence. Then that's the time to come back forward with an application if a further tree removal is needed. Trees can fail in high winds, but there is an exemption relating to tree work where there's an immediate risk of harm or injury. So in that situation, emergency works could take place, and the tree preservation also allows applications to be made, and I think it would be entirely appropriate to allow works to maintain adequate clearance over the highway. The council did use a planning condition to ensure that if any trees were removed within 5 years of completion, that replacements should be planted. So, the fact we've not protected all the trees, it will allow some work, and, it will allow some replacements. But we felt that in the long term, that the use of a tree preservation order is the best way to secure the long-term protection of the trees. When confirming a tree preservation order, it is possible to modify it at the same time. So we can omit trees, but we can't add trees to this tree preservation order. If you, as a committee, felt we've gone too far, we've selected the wrong trees, the best course of action would be allow the order to lapse in March, and this would allow time to make a fresh order, and maybe we could look at protecting an alternative number of trees on the site. But the recommendation as it stands is that it is confirmed without modification.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Pettit. We do have a speaker on this item. This is Sarah Dawn, who I think is the objector to the application. So welcome. And as you will have seen, you've got up to 5 minutes to speak to the committee. It's no rush. As soon as you're ready, start speaking. The clock will start counting down. If you're still speaking at 4.5 minutes, we'll just tell you 30 seconds left. So over to you.
Can I start whenever? Thank you. Okay. The trees my husband and I are objecting to are 7 of the 15 trees you have proposed TPOs on. They are yew trees T5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 12 and 14 on the plan the council provided. We understand TPOs can be made if it is expedient in the interests of amenity. Firstly, we don't believe these 7 yew trees meet this criterion. The council hasn't provided any explanation, nor have they shown that protection would bring a reasonable degree of public benefit in the present or future. In assessing a tree's amenity value, consideration must be paid to its visual impact, health, structural integrity, life expectancy, suitability to the location, and impact on highways. We had a tree survey carried out in January 22 in accordance with BS 58371. 2 of the yew trees chosen are of C grade, which are of low quality with an estimated remaining life expectancy of at least 10 years. These are unremarkable trees offering temporary landscape benefits. Only evening sun hits the north-facing church side to keep it dry and prevent damp, and at the same time when we can enjoy it amongst our busy working lives. Please refer to pictures on screen 1 through 4, which demonstrate how the chosen trees screen the historic church from public view and evening sun. The majority of the yews chosen are between 5 and 8 metres tall and have a girth between 38 and 96 centimetres. T9 and 10 are C-grade yews, and the remaining yews do not have high visual impact or suitability to the location due to concealing the church from public view. We understand it is common for churchyards to have yew trees in them. However, St Mary's Church is now redundant as a place of worship and will be converted into a family home. The yew trees are not of ancient significance according to their girth. In contrast, the largest girth of the sycamores being 300 centimetres with the tallest at 18 metres. Pictures 5 and 6 show the sycamore and limes would be in the interest of local amenity due to their character, significant girth, height and canopy span, which we have no objection to. We aren't aware a council site visit has taken place, which we believe is recommended in line with government policy advice prior to confirming. Amenity is not defined in law, so we urge you to exercise judgment when deciding whether it is within your powers to make this order in its entirety. Our tree survey states the woodland setting is attractive, but there has been minimal management of the trees, and the old church is largely obscured from public view. Between the church and the road, a double row of yew trees leans over the roof, leaving the area dark and oppressive with little natural light reaching the windows. There is scope to reduce or remove a proportion of the trees to open up the site without spoiling the setting. The beauty of the church is shown in picture 7, overshadowed by trees. Secondly, the yew tree is known to be one of the most poisonous woody plants in the world, with all components of the tree, except from the fleshy red part of the berry, contain lethal amounts of taxine, which is a toxic alkaloid found in the yew. They are toxic to both humans and pets, and the Woodland Trust website states eating just a few leaves can make a small child severely ill, and there have been some deaths linked to yew poisoning. The Human Rights Act 1998 states every natural or legal person is entitled to the peaceful enjoyment of his possessions, and everyone's right to life should be protected by law. Being proud dog owners ourselves, having so many yew trees in our family garden will deprive us of peaceful enjoyment of our possessions, as we won't be able to let our dogs, or if we are fortunate enough, our children, in our garden without constantly monitoring their every move. We will be concerned about what they may have picked up and eaten and whether it could be fatal, affecting our mental well-being. In dogs, as little as 2 or 3 grams of yew can cause fatality. So it is plausible that a dog could ingest a lethal dose playing with a yew branch, and our dog loves sticks. We urge you to ask yourself the question, would you feel comfortable living on a 0.4 acre site with 21 toxic yew trees, having your children, grandchildren and pets in the garden, knowing that a TPO has been granted on some of these trees which can cause fatalities? Because we certainly do not. In closing, we urge you to take into consideration our objections and strike a fair balance between our interests requesting peaceful enjoyment of our family home and the interests of the public by modifying this potential order. We would like to work with the council to mutually agree the TPOs. We know the benefits trees make to the environment and wildlife, and we are open to keeping 8 TPOs, including 2 of the yew trees that are feature at the church. Numbers T1 and T4, which are B grade, shown in pictures 8 and 9, as we can cordon these trees off. They're at the forefront of the entrance and aesthetically pleasing, and we are also open to replanting any trees removed with well-managed trees and more suitable species. Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. That was well done. Bang on time as well. So thanks for that. So thank you. We don't have any other speakers on guest speakers on this item, but do we want to pick up on any of the points? And in particular, Mrs. Dawn sort of referred to understanding that she doesn't disagree to some of the proposed yew trees being protected, but we heard the concerns they have, especially about the potential poison, but also the darkness effect and light. So can we just pick up on those?
Yes, I think visual amenity was mentioned, and when we consider visual amenity, we're looking at the appearance of the trees, their health, their appropriateness to the setting, and the impact on the public. And as I've mentioned earlier, when we consider the impact on the public, we're considering public vantage points, at places that are accessible to the public. So roads and pavements is the obvious one, but it could include a footpath or a public open space. And with the trees being positioned on the bend in a road, they are quite a prominent feature for quite long distances as you approach from the both directions. As I said, it has tried to be a selective TPO. So we've not protected the trees closest to the church. I think you mentioned there's a double row of yews. So we've tried to protect the outside row closest to the road. We haven't protected the yews or some of the other trees that are closest to the church. And I totally understand. I think I wouldn't expect someone to live there and retain all the trees on this site. So the TPO does allow some removal of trees, particularly those closest to the building.
Okay, thank you. So, colleagues, Councillor Walker.
That's a question about this assessment of amenity. One of the things that we've read about and heard about tonight is potentially a balance between the amenity value to the public of the trees and also the potential amenity value to the public of the view of the historic building. To what extent do you say that we should be considering balancing those two different aspects?
I think that's a fair point. I wouldn't argue that. Well, I suppose it's about balancing removal of trees, which do enhance the character of the setting. But I think it's no bad thing to open up some views of the church. Like I say, we're focused on protecting the trees at a roadside because they're most prominent. There's a lot of trees that aren't protected, and I think removing those would still open up views, maybe not quite as much as I think the owners would like. But so I think views aren't necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Thomas.
I'd like to move the recommendation, please. I think there's plenty of, I can see exactly what the applicants are saying here and their concerns, but I think there's plenty of scope once they get into the work and they've removed the trees that they can remove and they want to remove, they can do works to the other trees, or they can come back and ask to be removed at that stage. And that's the point of the TPOs, that there will be another conversation about that. And on that basis, I would move the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Mallinder?
Yeah, again, I'll second that recommendation. Although yew trees are poisonous, it's as the officer has said, it's usually there's very few cases, mainly because they're not very appetising. The aril is, in fact, which is the bit around what you might think of as being a berry. It's called an aril. I've actually eaten that because I went on a foraging course, but you mustn't eat the seed. So if any of you want to try it, actually tastes quite pleasant, but don't eat the seed. I wasn't brave enough to spit it out. I actually took it out beforehand. But of course, it is actually also a source of a treatment for breast and ovarian cancer called Taxol, which they extract from the bark, although I believe it's made in the laboratory now. But it is a native tree and is very important for birds and small mammals, providing a lot of cover. Could I ask, please, is the 1857 chapel church, I've been looking at it, listed at all? I thought it must be an older building, but in fact it's only 1857.
I wasn't expecting that. So in a previous life, I was the council's conservation officer. The building is not listed. The vast majority of the building as it exists today is 1856. The Victorians did rebuild an awful lot of churches. Churches have been neglected in this country, and a lot of them were on their last legs. They get a bad press for being heavy-handed in renovations, but the reality is a lot of churches wouldn't exist if the Victorians hadn't largely rebuilt them. This one is almost entirely rebuilt. There is very little that predates 1856, but there has been a chapel on this site. It is not mentioned in Domesday Book. It did exist by about 1250 because it's referenced in a property dispute, but it's not listed.
That was very well remembered because I've just read all that. So unless you were looking it up earlier, that you excellent. Thank you. But
May have foreseen the question.
Ah, right. Thank you.
And now you know why Mr. Boat used to be the conservation officer.
Yeah,
as well.
yeah, excellent.
Councillor Perrick.
Yeah, I've just got a question in relation to some statistics here. It says in paragraph 9, despite yew trees' reputation for being poisonous, recorded cases of such incidents are low. Do we have any statistics of what this recorded incidents and how low they are, because so that we can compare it with something? Because I am concerned about the Human Rights Act, and I would like to have some more information before we go for a vote, because there's no data here.
I mean, it's clearly dangerous to Google anything on the internet, and it can provide all sorts of information. But we've got a book on tree law, and so the court cases that have come about have generally resulted from farm animals, and quite often people trimming a yew tree, putting all the cuttings to one side, maybe on the edge of a field, and cows coming along and grazing, or cows wandering into someone else's land. Yes, there are. I googled something this afternoon. A boy in Manchester died after eating yew berries, but I think it is uncommon, and there's also examples of people trying to commit suicide by eating yew. So, it is something to be aware of. They are poisonous trees. Yeah.
Just a supplementary. So, in terms of the information you've got about a boy dying because he's eaten a leaf of the yew tree, what's the location of those trees? Are any of those trees on a residential plot? Because the difference here being that this is not going to be a church amenity anymore. It is going to be somebody's private home. And my worry is that I'm all for tree preservation orders, but also the balance needs to be that this is someone's home. And are we making an order which could potentially put a dog or a child's life at risk?
There's nothing to stop you growing poisonous plants on your land. And I mean, I think there's a yew tree in West Bridgeford Park. So, you know, we allow yew trees to grow on our own land. I think particularly with regard to children, you know, it is part of parenting that you try and educate them and, you know, make them aware of risks. And that's perhaps one of the hardest parts of parenting, because it's difficult to do that. But from my own experience, you know, I think children respond quite well to being told what's dangerous and what isn't. I've never owned a dog, to be honest, so I don't know how you train a dog.
So from my own experience of parenting, children don't always respond to what you ask of them. And this is something that you're talking about in somebody's residential property. So if it's a road risk, and if I tell my children that you need to look at both the sides of the road and cross the tree, or this is a tree on a public area and you need to keep your distance, probably I can monitor that a little bit more. But 24/7 in my backyard, if I am having something poisonous and I keep on telling my child, you shouldn't be going there, there will definitely be a point in time that the curiosity will take over and they will go and do that. So that's just a difference of opinion there.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Perry. If Councillor Walker, you wanted to come back in. And
thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say something and ask something. It's Mrs. Dawn mentioned that, in effect, that you know, they've entered into a process of negotiation, if you like, i.e., we don't object to these ones, but we do object to those. I think it's, you know, we see in this committee and in our wards a lot of suspect practice when it comes to how people treat trees under their ownership, and I think I would like to say that it's to their credit the way that they've gone about dealing with this, bearing in mind what we see elsewhere. But essentially, that's by the by. But you know, if the recommendation or the motion that's been moved fails, is there a possible outcome this evening that looks like agreeing with the proposed negotiation? And what does that look like?
I mean, the logic I applied to this site was the trees on the frontage are the most prominent. They're on the boundary, that they're away from the church. I think if you were to allow large-scale removal of the yews on the frontage, some of the arguments I've made about the trees at the back of site not being as prominent would be reversed. You know, you're going to open up views to different trees. So if we didn't protect the trees at the front, I would perhaps want to protect more trees on the site that aren't currently protected.
okay, Councillor Wells, and then Councillor Thomas, and Councillor Edwin.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officer tell me what's the height of the yew trees?
I've not measured them, but I don't believe they're much more than 7-8 meters. I think that would be quite a fair assessment of their height.
Yep, and Councillor Thomas.
I'd just like to say that if we vote for this recommendation tonight, we're not condemning these people to have these trees in the garden where their children are going to be forever. We're just saying that there has to be a planning application, another planning application for that to be considered in the context of the work that's been done, and the then appearance and any then surveys and any further information that comes forward. So the decision, we're not being asked whether or not the trees can be felled. We're being asked whether or not an extra layer of protection is put in before that happens. Okay,
thank you. Councillor Edwin.
I think I was really just going to comment on, whilst there's some concern about whether the fact that yews are poisonous and what their danger is. I can certainly think of several examples of churchyards or old churchyards, former churches that have become residences that have retained their yew trees and become family homes. So it's not as though, and I think Councillor Thomas's point about the fact that there is further negotiation to be had, should there, but it means that has to be done with negotiation. So I don't think it's an issue.
Right, thank you. I was also wondering about sort of how we got to this position in the first place. Had there been much discussion with the property owner prior to us coming along with the TPO, and also picking up on Councillor Eddybean's point and Councillor Walker, I think it was as well, the potential negotiation or potential modifications at some point. Could you just help us how that might all work in reality?
So we've granted permission for the church to be converted to a dwelling twice. The first time we did consider a tree preservation order, but with other workload, it sort of fell by the wayside. The second application had a plan, sort of, it was slightly vague, if I'm honest. It said, tree removal. And at that point, sort of alarm bells sort of started to ring, and that's when we decided to make the tree preservation order. Unfortunately, we made the tree preservation order quite late in the planning process, as the decision was about to be made. So the officer, did a condition that said any trees removed should be replaced within 5 years. But that doesn't give any long-term protection. So yeah, we haven't done a huge amount of negotiation. It was a tree preservation I made where I sort of used my best judgment about what was appropriate.
So how would it work that, because we heard from Mrs. Dawn that they don't disagree to, I think it was numbers 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, and 14 being part of the TPO. So if the TPO was granted tonight, how would we go forward? Possibly with the future of those and the other trees. I'm just conscious of the fact that trees are there and they will be there for a long time, and there are concerns from the owner of the property about not just the poisonous berries, but the dark, the light, and or the lack of light, and all the rest of the overshadowing. I guess what I'm thinking is we also have to think of the amenity of the householders, and I just need to be sure that there is flexibility if we go ahead with this.
We could modify the tree preservation order tonight to omit trees, but we can't add trees to it. I think the current tree preservation order, as it stands, will remain in place until March unless we choose to revoke it earlier. So we've got 3 months whilst the trees are protected. So I think it would be useful to get a steer on how far we go in terms of protecting trees, but it would give us 3 months to determine if we should protect other trees if we didn't feel that particularly the yew trees were appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Mallender.
Yeah, I agree with what has been said by Councillor Thomas in that we're not saying you can't ever fell them, just say you have to apply to do so. And about the poisonous side of things, they don't leap out. You can actually brush past them. You actually have to ingest something when it's poisonous. It's not venomous, it's poisonous. So you have to eat it to have an effect. So if you have holly in your garden with berries, holly berries are poisonous. If you have mistletoe and you bring it into the house, that is deadly poisonous, all of it, berries and leaves. I grew up in a house which had a laburnum, and they actually do look a bit like peas in the pod, although not that much. But I managed to not eat them when told not to. So, I think it is something that there are a lot of poisonous things out there, foxgloves and things like that, that you can brush past them. That's not a problem, but you obviously probably don't want to eat them. So I'd just like to reassure people that you can actually, as has been said previously, there are plenty of yew trees and other poisonous species that are planted in parks and gardens already. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And so to be clear again, if the order is or the recommendation is approved tonight, there is scope for future negotiation over trees that may or may not need to be considered to be dealt with in the future. That's I just need to make sure everyone's clear on what happens after tonight, really.
Yeah, we could confirm the order, and I'm guessing, you know, if you'd like me to sort of meet with the owners and
yes, I think I'm saying that. Yeah.
Come up with a slight variation on a theme, you know, I'm happy to do
Yes.
that. Yeah,
I think that you've put it succinctly. I think I'm keen, and I would imagine committee is keen that there is dialogue between you and the owners, so that happy outcomes can be achieved. I just want to be sure of that. Okay, Councillor Thomas again.
I'm quite happy to change the recommendation to include happy dialogue. Chair.
There's probably a more formal way of referring to happy dialogue, but I'm sure that we find appropriate wording in that regards. So, and you seconded that, didn't you?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, if it wanted to protect different trees, that would be fine. Yeah, with negotiation.
Right. So if we're all clear on that and all happy as we can be, so I think we've had again a good and important discussion and debate on this. So we need to make a decision, don't we? So we've got the recommendation moved and seconded, along with the addition for negotiation and dialogue with the property owners. So show of hands in favour of that, please. And anyone against? 3. So that was, how many was that then? Was that 8 to 4 and 3 against? So that is carried, but with the additional discussion and dialogue with the owners. Okay, right. Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for coming in and talking to us. And it was very, very clear the points you were making, and we absolutely understand. Right, so our final application tonight, you're very welcome to stay, or if you want to go, it's entirely up to you. Okay, we've only got one. We've just got one more item on the agenda, and this is another new tree preservation order. This is at 80 Firs Road at Walton. Mr. Pettit again, please.
We've protected an oak tree in the rear garden of 80 Firs Road. It's a 1950s bungalow set behind a tree-lined grass verge in Edwalton. To the rear of the property is Alford Road playing fields, which are owned and maintained by the council. And the playing fields, whilst the fields are rather nondescript rectangle of grass, the backdrop is actually quite pleasant, with a mixture of trees on the council's land and some in the adjacent gardens. So the dark green blob in the middle of the tree is the one we've protected, and I think from a distance it contributes to this backdrop of trees. But actually, as you get closer to it, if you can move on to the next photo, it's actually really quite a nice individual tree. It's an oak, mature, in good health. Have you got any other photos? Yeah. So again, that's view from Valley Road. You can see, you know, it's an important backdrop. And then this is sort of towards the front of the property, and the protected tree is the one that's got the golden leaves in the sort of the left-hand side of the image. And that's a council-owned verge with, again, some trees. And that's sort of the edge of Edwalton Conservation Area. So the tree preservation order was made following a request from a member of the public who overheard a potential buyer of the property discussing development options. Clearly, the tree is good public amenity value, so we protected it. The owner, the daughter of the owner, sorry, has objected. We made the tree preservation order as the property was for sale, and I can understand why that would be, you know, quite an unwelcome sort of timing. But they, the objection is that you know, when the mother was living there, they never had any issues with the trees, and they've occasionally pruned some branches, but it's never been a problem to them. That they question whether the tree preservation order was made or requested by one of the sort of nearby neighbours that they doubt it was because they loved the tree, and they suggest it might be to put an oar in the way of the sale of the property. And they suggested that the buyer of the property will be notified of the tree preservation order. It isn't entirely clear to us if the property is being sold, but what's happened in the meantime is we've received an application to construct a side extension to the property, and that's been granted, and the oak's not going to be affected by that extension. The applicant did phone me. They are aware the tree's covered by a tree preservation order, but they've chosen not to object. As we've probably demonstrated tonight, you know, when properties change ownership, the views of the new incoming owners may be different to those who lived there previously, and it's all too common for, you know, concerns to be raised regarding falling leaves, loss of light, bird muck, and general concerns about living next to a large tree. Given that there's construction work to take place, and there's probably or has been or is likely to be a change in ownership, we recommend that the tree preservation order is confirmed without modification.
Thank you. And we have no speakers on this item. And as you mentioned in your report, the late representations does confirm that the new owner of the property has been in touch and they are aware of the TPO. So, Councillor Mallender.
I'd like to put forward the recommendation, please, this time. I think we have the support of the owners of the potential owners of the property.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Parrott?
I'd like to second that.
Thank you. And Councillor Wells, you want to speaking as well?
Thank you, Chair. If they're going to have a side extension, the tree is nowhere near the side extension at all. So the tree shouldn't affect it.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No? Fine. Well, I think it was fairly clear photographs and presentation, and we've had the recommendation moved and seconded, moved by Councillor Mallender and seconded by Councillor Parrott. No other speakers, so let's have a show of hands. Those in favour, please show. And that's unanimous, so that TPO is granted. And there's just one other brief item on the agenda, which is just really for noting an appeal that was heard and was actually allowed. Is there anything you want to tell us about this, or it's just really for information, isn't it? Right. So that's the final item on the agenda. Again, sorry for the rushed start and the difficulties a few of us had getting here this evening. Thank you to our visitors. We'll close the meeting at 7:25. May I wish you a very happy Christmas and best wishes for the new year, and which the way time is going, it'll soon be here. So safe journeys home, assuming the traffic is clear. Okay, thank you.